Welcome. My name is Steve Borkenhagen. I am the Executive Director of Urban Confluence Silicon Valley, the international ideas competition we are currently holding to design an iconic landmark for San Jose and Silicon Valley at Arena Green in downtown San Jose. I'm going to give you a brief overview of our project, and then we'll be accepting questions for the vast majority of the time today. We very much appreciate your interest, and we appreciate you attending today. San Jose Light Tower Corporation is the umbrella organization of Urban Confluence Silicon Valley. Two other gentlemen and myself founded this organization about 3 years ago with the goal of fixing a problem that we saw in Silicon Valley and San Jose, which is the lack of an iconic landmark of any kind. If one defines Silicon Valley to include San Francisco, clearly there are fabulous iconic landmarks in San Francisco. For purposes of our competition, we don't include San Francisco as part of Silicon Valley. So we've been around for about 3 years. We started our competition this year. We've been planning it for a couple of years. The competition opened in July of this year, and submissions will be accepted until January 15th of 2020. Urban Confluence Silicon Valley is simply the name of our competition. Once we have a winning design next July, we're guessing that the name of our landmark will be related to whatever that design ends up being. So we think it will essentially name itself at that time. We've had 2 unanimous city council approvals already in the last year and a half. The first one allowed us to move forward and perform a site selection study, which we did with Steinberg Hart, which is one of the most successful local architecture and planning firms in San Jose and Silicon Valley. The second approval was to allow us to move forward with Arena Green. So the City Council, again, twice unanimously approved what we're going to do. They approved allowing us to move forward with Arena Green, which is a city park. Our intention is to give this project as a gift to the citizens of San Jose, Silicon Valley, and the world. But it's in a city park. We will never own the land. There were some questions earlier on about the status of the land. This is a park. It will remain a park in perpetuity. All of our supporters are people who care about our community and urban spaces and love the notion of doing some really serious placemaking here in San Jose and Silicon Valley. So a brief description of the site, Arena Green. It's approximately 14 acres. Of that, approximately 5 acres are buildable. All of this information is clearly on the site diagram on the website, so you can go there to get lots of details if you haven't already done so. I'd recommend before you send me lots of questions that you carefully analyze and study the site, because there's a lot of very valuable material there for any of you designers. A reminder that our project can be anything. We expect submittals from architects, artists, landscape architects, people who work with water, sculptors who obviously work in the world of sculptures, and we intentionally have very wide open parameters on what you can design. So please let your creative juices flow. So approximately 5 of the acres are buildable. On the west side of the site, approximately 3 1/4 acres. On the east side, approximately 1 3/4 acres, for a total of about 5 acres. The height limit for this design is 200 feet. It's not precisely the height, but for purposes of this competition, we'd like you to use 200 feet. On the same night that we received unanimous approval to move forward with Arena Green, our city council changed the height limits in and around our site. So now it's approximately 200 feet. Previously, it was only 100 to 130 feet. That was a really positive development because it obviously gives you designers more latitude to build something tall. We made a very conscious decision to have the design parameters for this competition be very simple. So again, if you go to the website, you'll see that we're not asking for a huge amount of detail. This is an ideas competition. We do not expect fully fleshed out designs. So remember that when you're submitting, that this is not like a plan set that you would submit, especially if you're an architect. It's an idea. In phase 2, we'll go much deeper. And in phase 2, we'll be giving $150,000 stipend to the 3 finalists to help you fund whatever support you might need from other specialists. We decided on an ideas competition instead of the other approaches we might have taken. For example, we could have simply hired some designer who's well known. We could have had an RFP or an RFQ. We were largely inspired by the Vietnam War Memorial and the story of Maya Lin, and we want designers from all over the world, whether they're high school students, college students, professionals who've been in the field their whole lives, or anyone else to submit. So that was done very consciously on our part. We've raised about $1,200,000 with another $400,000 in very recent pledges. I say that to let you know that we are very serious about this, and we will get to the finish line on this. The point of this competition is for us to come up with a spectacular design from one of you that will guarantee our success. But we are here to succeed. We've got the commitment of the most important people in our community. Our story resonates for them, and we're really excited to work with all of you in the phase that we're in right now. There's going to be a site tour on Saturday, October 26th at 10 a.m. our time, and we hope many of you, especially people who live in the Bay Area or in California, will attend. But please be assured that a video of that entire tour will be available on the website shortly after, probably a day or two after the site tour. One final comment is that we were very deliberate in not putting a budget cap on this. We believe that in an extremely expensive project that is inspirational will be far more successful, both fundraising and otherwise, than something that's mediocre. So we have no constraints as far as the budget for this, and we hope that will allow all of you to not be stifled in the ideas that you submit to all of us. So that's a brief summary. Of course, please feel free to ask questions now. I'll be answering questions for the rest of the webinar period. And if you feel like I missed something in my introduction, you can obviously ask questions now. First question I have is, what is the inspiration of the words urban confluence, and how might they shed light on the competition? Good question. Santa Clara Valley is a very suburban place. It went through a destruction of its downtown, like many downtowns in America did in the 50s, 60s, and 70s during the phase of what we called in America urban renewal, which in many cases was urban destruction. So we are clearly an urban plan, which is why the word urban is there. The word confluence describes the fact that our site includes Confluence Point, which is where Guadalupe River and Los Gatos Creek meet. So on the site map, you'll see a triangle on the southern edge, and it's where these two rivers meet. So we think this gives you lots of opportunities to have ideas that relate to the two bodies of water and then the river that ultimately flows out of the site. The site visit date, again, is Saturday, October 26th, and you'll see it on the website clearly stated. Another question wants to go deeper on the target budget, or the questioner asks about a ballpark of what is realistic to be fundraised. We think that hundreds of millions of dollars can be raised for something this important. And again, we are in Silicon Valley. This is the wealthiest place probably in the history of the world. We've already been working with A-listers who validate our theory about this. But at this point, the missing link is a spectacular design. So one of you will end up being our partner in this quest. Next question is it possible to design overhanging structures over the development? Yes, follow the the brief. The brief has a number of constraints listed in it, but as long as those constraints are followed, yes, things can overhang. I'm not sure what the questioner is thinking it might overhang. If it's the river or the riparian corridor, the answer is yes. Over city streets, the answer is probably no. We can only be so detailed in some of our answers because once we've chosen our 3 finalists, we know there are going to be lots of questions that we will end up taking to all of the various bodies that control the spaces of the site and around the site. Another question is about the functional purpose of the structure. Yes, we don't see this being a building as such, rather a structure, but functionally, if somebody has bars, restaurants, cafes, visitor centers, things like that, those will certainly be acceptable. If you think about places like the Eiffel Tower and the Space Needle, 2 of the more successful, very tall structures in the world, there's lots of activity, commercial and non-commercial in there, and we see that as being completely acceptable. There's a question about whether the initial data is only in PDF or is it the DWG, SketchUp, or other formats. Again, follow the design presentation board template. I believe it's very explicit about exactly what you can and cannot submit. If you're feeling otherwise, send an email to competition@Urban Confluence and we'll certainly answer that question. Next question is about museums and who might be tenants of the structure that we're building. Yes, you can be as creative as you like. If you have a theme that you'd like to be part of your proposal, please include the theme. You can do that in your narrative. And virtually any kind of program could take place on this site. Another question about the design presentation board. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I believe that it's very clear in the description on the website. So again, if you, after reading that, if it's still not clear, please send an email later and I'll get back to you individually. The vast majority of the people we've talked to feel like our instructions are very clear. How may video be included with the presentation material? Video is not allowed to be presented. Again, back to the very clear criteria. We're not allowing all types of material to be submitted. Again, it's an ideas competition. It's simple. So on this design presentation board, you've got enough room to show us your vision and your inspiration, and all of these details will be fleshed out when we choose the 3 finalists in phase 2 of our project. Is it possible to connect the 2 sites with a bridge-like structure? The answer is yes. Bridges or bridge-like structures would be fine. You'll notice there are some constraints, particularly related to the riparian corridor and the environment in the brief, but you should be as creative as you possibly can, and we will deal in phase 2 with all of the details related to footings and other things that would end up being necessary if you do bridge the 2 sides. There's a question about whether a CAD model is available. I'm working on that today, and that answer will be posted on our website by the end of today. Yes, we would like you to register for the site tour. That registration will be available online by tomorrow. So please register. But if for some reason you don't register, show up. It's going to be a tour for however many people show up. So we'd like registration so we can plan carefully, but show up regardless if you're not able for some reason to register. Can the structure hover over the river if both plots of land are occupied? Yes. Is the electrical high tension service intended to be relocated? There are currently no plans at the City of San Jose or the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy, who are our partners in this, to relocate those lines. But we plan to work on this aggressively with all of the possible partners. In the area, BART will be coming in soon. That's Bay Area Rapid Transit, for those of you who aren't from California. And there's a station that's going to be put in right next door to where we're going. So the Diridon station is a few hundred yards away from the site, and it's been described as the future Grand Central Station of the West. So Diridon station is going to be improved, BART is going to arrive, and this immense Google urban area that they've been working on now for a couple of years is also right across the street. We are hopeful that there will be a huge electrical and infrastructure change plan associated with all these improvements, and we're hopeful that those high power lines will end up being put underground or relocated somewhere else. There's currently no plan, but you can include that in your submittal, knowing that we don't yet have a plan to do that. It's something we will be working on in the coming years. There's a question about summarizing the lighting constraints for the site. The questioner also says, I understand there are aircraft and habitat restrictions. That's all true. For the most part, related to the aircraft, it's pretty simple. That just means that we can only go up approximately 200 feet. As far as the habitat is concerned, there is a biology study on our website that you can read. We need to be completely respectful of the riparian corridor, the river, and birds and fish and other wildlife, and we intend to do so. It's clearly in the report on the website, so you can see that there. And as far as lighting is concerned, there are two lighting documents also on our website that explain the constraints. For example, we can't shine lights upward where they would potentially get into the eyes of a pilot or in any way cause a dangerous situation for aircraft. But again, you'll find when you go to our website that there are lots of documents that answer virtually all of these questions. There's a question about height limits, but also about depth limits. Clearly, there's a water table down below where it's right near a river. We don't know how deep we can go. There's also a question about geological data, which we do not yet have, but we will have later. So my advice would be practical, use common sense, but we don't know the specific limitations on that yet. A good question here. In the brief, an emphasis on height is stressed, but you mentioned Maya Lin's Vietnam War Memorial. Is the design proposal required to have an emphasis on height? Definitely not. Your submittal can be anything you want: high, low, in the ground, above the ground, crossing the rivers, not crossing the rivers. I hope I'm clear on the flexibility that we have in that regard. And we expect submittals of all different types of ideas that have nothing to do with one another. Is the idea that there may be a museum as part of this, tied to Silicon Valley, perhaps? Perhaps. Again, this would be driven by you and your creative ideas. There are some museums in Silicon Valley. I'm not sure what the questioner is thinking, but clearly you can suggest that in your site plan and in your narrative. To clarify, on the presentation board, it looks like the exact site map provided should be used for placing our project on the site. That is correct. We do not want you to create an alternative site plan. When you say you want an icon like the Eiffel Tower or the Statue of Liberty, is there any structural feat which would make it iconic? I don't know. You know, icons and landmarks happen in an evolutionary way. We know that we've bitten off something really big here that we're trying to do. The iconic nature of this will come from the quality of whatever we build. I'm not sure I'm answering the question properly, but we're looking for some breathtaking project that has never been done in the world and that we hope will be one of the world's finest urban objects in the next few years. The design presentation board has 2 rectangles defined for each of the 2 images. Do we need to stay within those rectangles, or can we design a board that would include 2 images but not rigidly structured within the board. Now, you must follow the board. I want to be clear on why that is. This is to protect people who are submitting. In the next phase, we are going to have what we're calling a community competition panel, which is going to choose approximately 50, what we might call semi-finalists. We are going to print these 50 boards. These 50 boards will then be shown to the public, and then ultimately the jury of 11 will choose 3 finalists from the boards. If we allowed all of the designers to change their presentation boards, the format itself could bias people because some formats would be better than others. And that's why, to create an even playing field, we want everyone to stay strictly within the boundaries set by the design presentation board. Can this be a 24/7 structure, or is there a curfew in the park, given that it is a city park? Very good question. I believe there is a current curfew, but I actually don't know what it is. But we want this to be a 24/7 structure. So we will certainly lobby the city for policies that are supportive and consistent with what we are building here. Downtown San Jose is in a kind of a revolutionary state right now because of all of the projects that I mentioned earlier and ours. So please don't be limited about a 24/7 program in your suggestions. If the concept is kinetic, how may it be presented? And it's asking again about video. My answer is that you're just going to have to do your best with the presentation board as we've defined it. We know it might not be perfect for all presentations, but as I said a moment ago, it's important that we have a level playing field. Will quality photographs be available for rendering backplates? I believe we have a number of photographs posted already, and you can find lots of things online. But if there's something else that this questioner is looking at, please send me an email and I will answer it. How many ideas can one group or person submit? You can submit as many as you like, but each email address can only have one submittal associated with it. What materials can I use for design? Concrete, metal, trees, etc. You can use any material you like. No limits there whatsoever, other than because of environmental concerns, etc. Does a presentation on a sheet consist of a single image, or is it possible to have many images and diagrams in one sheet? As long as you follow the design presentation board rules carefully, you can do whatever you like. And if that's an inadequate answer, again, just a reminder to all of you, if I'm not answering your question now, I will answer it later. In fact, if we don't get through all of the questions during this program, I will post the answers to all of these questions on our website later. So don't be concerned if I don't get to your answer during the webinar. There's a large homeless presence on the site. Has any thought been given to that issue? Does San Jose have any initiatives in place? Very good question. As is the case in rivers and streams throughout the country, there's a great deal of homeless activity in and around the rivers. We hope to make the section of the river next to that goes through our site beautiful and pristine and pleasant by the end of our process. You know, we cannot unilaterally in any way, obviously, solve the homeless issue in the river or in our city, but we intend to work with any and all agencies that are working to make the river better. And there are many initiatives happening in San Jose with temporary housing, permanent housing, and the same kind of solutions that cities all across America are trying to implement. Can we play with the landscape around the site to better work with our design? Yes. But when it says around the site, I'm not sure if that means off the site or on the site. What we're going to do is limited to what's on the site. But clearly you can make suggestions of changes to trees and anything that's not specifically prohibited that you'll see on the website. There's a lot of, again, a lot of data about what can and cannot be changed and moved on the website now, particularly if you go to the site diagram of Arena Green. Can the presentation board have a vertical layout? I think that's asking if it can actually, if we would put the board vertically instead of horizontally, and the answer is no. All the boards will be displayed horizontally. How many entries are you prepared to review? Are all jurors reviewing all projects, or will they be split up between jurors? Very good question. Thank you for that. We are prepared to view however many submittals we get. We're hoping for thousands of submittals. The community competition panel that we are going to engage of professionals and non-professionals from our community will look at all of the submittals. Every member of the community competition panel will not look at all the submittals. They'll be split up somehow. So maybe each of them will look at 50 or 100. We will have very clear criteria that will be the identical criteria that the jury will use to select the winner. They will winnow down what we hope is thousands of submittals down to about 50. The jury will look at those 50, which will be printed on boards, but the jurors will be allowed to look at every submittal should they choose to do so. And I'm hopeful that the jurors will do that. But the jurors will clearly be focused on at least the 50 boards that we will have here in San Jose. The word placemaking has been used often in the briefing. Perhaps there you could clarify whether the nature of the project should be more active or rather passive. Another very good question. That's up to you. We are trying to activate the space. If you think about great urban places, the High Line comes to mind as one of the greatest transformations probably to an urban project in America in the last 20 years. Very active. We're hoping for lots of activity, but that doesn't mean that there isn't room for contemplative or passive aspects too. So again, I reiterate that the only limitations on what this can be are in your own, based on your own creativity. If there are several ideas, can one person from different emails register? I already answered that. The answer is yes, as long as there's no more than one submittal per email address. If our board is chosen for the community voting round, will we be notified? I actually haven't thought of this before, but I believe the answer will be yes, that when we've chosen our 50, let's call them semifinalists, even though a reminder that even when we've chosen the 50, everyone is still in play because the jury can look at any and all of the submittals. But my thought is that we will notify you of that. But I'd actually like to answer that differently. We will answer that later in a conclusive way. I had not thought of that before this moment. So that'll appear in the Q&A. Sorry to ask again about the presentation boards. It's still not clear to us. Must we explicitly use the presentation board design that was provided, including title and Urban Confluence logo, etc.? Or can we change the layout as long as we include 2 rendered images, the written narrative, and the provided site plan with our design inserted atop? I reiterate how we want this board to be rigid. For this questioner, if you're not feeling like I'm adequately answering this, please send me an email later and I will definitely answer it more clearly. Is there a required tree save area? No, but again, in the site plan, you'll notice a really clear listing of things that can be eliminated, can't be eliminated, or can be altered. And I believe that answers all the questions about the existing site and what is sacrosanct and can't be touched. Is there a minimum, it says pervious, I think it means pervious area required out of the 5 acres. I don't know the answer to a minimum pervious area required, and that's something that we would deal with in phase 2. So my answer would be to suggest your creative idea And if it's creative enough and you make it into the three finalists, we will deal with technical questions like how much pervious area is required. If design is flexible in placement, can it be submitted without a site background? I think my advice there would be to mention in the narrative that the placement is flexible, but still include the image so that we and everyone who looks at it can see what your design is. Can you elaborate on the current and future quality of the river area? The river is currently not in a great state, both for fish habitat and in other ways. What I can say is that we are going to work with any partner agencies possible. There's also an organization called SPUR in San Jose and in the Bay Area that's very much committed to improving the river park and the river. So SPUR, the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy, the Parks and Recreation Department, the Santa Clara Valley Water District that actually controls the site, we intend to work with all of them, and our goal is to have the river be improved in any way possible. We know that people in our community are extremely motivated to make this river a better place, whether it's being cleaner or a better environmental habitat for animals. In all those ways, we hope to improve the river. You mentioned that you have the majority of people on your side. It might be interesting to know what the concerns of some people are. I would say the only significant concerns that we had were from the environmental community because we hadn't done outreach to the environmental community as early as we probably should have. So people from the Sierra Club and the Audubon Society were very concerned early on, and we engaged a biologist and a lighting expert to be responsible in the way that we're treating the site. We think we've done a good job there. We'll continue to do a better job there, but those are the only concerns that we've had expressed. I would say the vast majority of people in our community love our idea and what we're doing. Obviously, they love it in theory because we don't have a design yet, so things will become a lot different first when we have three finalists, and then finally when we have the winner next July. What do you want to see on the board on the lower right corner of the board? Seems like a tremendous amount of area designated to just listing height, length, and width. I'm not looking at the board right this second, so I'll answer that question later. Question says, what are the priorities used to define the winner? We've intentionally kept things very wide open, but if you read the brief, we believe that it's only fair to judge all the submittals based on what it says in the brief. So read the brief carefully. It's not very long. And the criteria that we talk about there are what we are going to use for both the community competition panel and the jury. Can sound be an element used in the structure? Certainly, yes. What is the origin of the palm tree grove, and is there any sentiment for them to be kept or removed by the competition sponsors or the community? We've intentionally been flexible with relation to all the trees. We love trees. We expect that ultimately whatever we do will probably involve planting lots more trees. But as far as specific trees or the palm grove, there's no specific prohibition against changing it. But to go change these willy-nilly would not be advisable. I would say our community loves the trees on the site and would be very much opposed to just removing lots of trees for no reason. So let your creative idea drive whatever you might suggest is done with the trees. Can we redesign part of the park around our design? Absolutely, yes. That's really the whole point of the project, is to improve the park. So in addition to whatever landmark item or items you might suggest, lots of elements that improve the park are really what we're trying to do. This is a very important question. I hope you all listen to this one carefully. Will all submittals stay anonymous during the selection process? Absolutely, yes. No one on the community competition panel, no one on our team, and I'm actually the only one on our team who even has access to the submittable platform, and certainly no one on the jury will ever know the names of the submitters. This is, again, incredibly important because we don't want someone who's a famous designer who's gotten lots of press to have any advantage over a neophyte. So no one will know the names until the three finalists have actually been selected. And after the three finalists are selected, then clearly those three names will be publicized and everyone will know who they are. Can a proposed sculpture park be a design? Certainly, yes, absolutely. Do you know how many people typically visit the site on a daily basis now? How many future daily visitors do you anticipate? Currently, the number is extremely small. For a 15-acre park in the center of America's 10th largest city, the numbers would surprise everyone with how small they are. Very, very small numbers. We hope it's tens of thousands in the future. It's only limited by the quality of our project. If you again think of the Eiffel Tower, the Space Needle, or the Statue of Liberty, these are places that obviously radically transformed their location. The competition document indicated a potential massing with OEI, that's one engine inoperable, height increase to 247 feet on one corner and 257 feet on another. So we've said to use 200 feet as an estimate throughout all of your proposals. I mentioned earlier that the actual precise height limits throughout the site are slightly above 200 feet. But for now, we'd like you to use 200 feet, knowing that in phase 2, these precise height limits will be shared and be able to be used. The site tour, again, Saturday, October 26th, 10 o'clock a.m. at Arena Green. Are there any new plans to do a new indoor stadium in San Jose to replace the SAP Center in the near future? I've never heard of such a plan. The SAP Center is a fabulous building, even though it's one of the older hockey arenas in America. And I would be flabbergasted if it were scraped and a new one were built, but that's not something that I know the answer to. But I've never heard of any plans. Are there any protected areas on the site? If so, will there be a tree survey? No, there are no specifically protected areas that I know of. But as I mentioned earlier, we should all be extremely respectful with everything to do with the environment, including the trees. But again, if we removed many of the trees, we'll end up replanting at some ratio. We agree with the city, probably 3 trees replanted for every 1 removed or something like that. How many of those would need to be on site versus off site? I don't know the answer to, but that again is something we would figure out in phase 2. The city Parks and Recs Department, the council, they're all our partners in this. We don't do anything without working with them. So they know that we are very serious about respecting all aspects of this park. Will the High Life still be around while we install this piece? For those of you who don't know, High Life is a restaurant that's been in the neighborhood for decades. As far as I know, it's going to be there forever. It's old, but still very popular. It's a half block from our site. Question of how many people are attending this webinar? We have 420 registrations. I'm not sure the exact number who are online right now, but it's I know it's over 100 and maybe it's 200 to 300. How much time will be given to the 3 finalists to flesh out their designs? Very good question. That'll be approximately 3 months. That'll happen after these 3 finalists are chosen. It could be as much as 4 months. Are there any plans to do a sound buffer along the highway? Is the highway loud? Yes, the highway's loud like a typical highway would be. It is elevated about approximately, I'm going to say 40 feet, which probably buffers it already. We don't have a plan to do a buffer, but that can certainly be something that could be in a submittal, some kind of a berm or something like that. But to point out, I want you all to remember when talking about sound that this site is directly underneath the flight pattern. So it's not a really quiet site. It's got airplane noise every 3 to 10 minutes. It's probably not ideal, but it's just an aspect of the site. Are there any public amenities that locals feel are lacking in the general vicinity of this site? Excellent question. I would say that the public would answer that public amenities of all kinds are missing at this site, which is why we are using it for our project. It's a fabulous centrally located site. It's the biggest urban park in all of Silicon Valley. Downtown San Jose is the only true gritty, I'll call it urban center in all of Silicon Valley. There are other cities, including Palo Alto and Mountain View, that have extremely active commercial centers, but they're not the kind of urban big downtown that you see all across the world. We are the only one. So back to the public amenities, the more creative you can get, the better about what amenities you might pick there, you might want to put on Arena Green. Is the river accessible for water sports, for instance, canoeing? Can this topic be implemented in the project? That's an excellent question, and we don't have an answer to it yet. So what I would suggest is that you do include those kind of elements if you think they're important to your vision, and then we will fight the battle for you about canoeing, kayaking, and anything else that might be possible in the river. You know, rivers are complicated places because there are lots of organizations with oversight: State of California, local, water district, City of San Jose, County of Santa Clara, et cetera, et cetera. But our dream vision would include play in the river like is suggested in this question. FYI, we tried to join the webinar on multiple devices and Zoom informed us that only 100 people were allowed to join and that number had already been reached. I don't know whether that is true or not. If that is true, I just want to remind anybody who might be listening that this entire webinar will be posted on our website by tomorrow, and anyone and everyone who's interested in seeing all of these answers will be able to see them. So again, if that's the case, we apologize, but all of these questions and answers will be posted, and also any questions that I get via email will also be answered. Is the park part of Site Lab San Jose master plan? Will we see the master plan, or are the master plans redevelopment in the area? I have to confess ignorance of Site Lab San Jose master plan. So I will research that and answer it later. Is there a wind analysis of the site I can access, like a wind rose? I do not know the answer to that. I will research it. Is there a general topographic plan? Again, not that I know of. I will research it and post the answer online. Who typically uses the park on a day-to-day basis? How about weekends? My depressing answer is very few people. It's not a very people-friendly park right now, even though we think it's a diamond in the rough. There are periodic races and runs and public events at which hundreds or thousands, or even in some cases probably 10,000 people might go through the park on a given day, but they're few and far between. And for the most part, the park is underutilized and there are very few people on site. Are the use of active water elements allowed in the design? Absolutely, yes. Only limited, again, by your own creativity.
There's some questions in the chat that we need to answer as well.
Could we consider using the river's water for irrigation purposes? I don't know the answer to that. Again, I will do research with the Santa Clara Valley Water District and other agencies that control the space. Within our site limits, could we build structures in place of the trees? Yes, again, please follow the constraints that are listed in the brief. And if you feel like the constraints don't adequately answer your questions, restate them, send an email, and we will work on all of that. Can we build on Confluence Point where the river splits? The answer is no. And you'll see clearly on the site diagram, if you go to the site diagram in resources for submitters, it lists the areas that are sacrosanct where things cannot be done. It also lists where things can be done. Another very good question, what entity will operate the finished structure? No one knows. In talking to the city, we've all agreed that until we know what's designed, we have no idea how it might be operated. So it could end up being operated by the City of San Jose, the Parks and Recreation Department. It could be operated by the Guadalupe River Park Conservancy. A reminder, we are going to give this as a gift to the city, and then they'll have decisions to make about how it's operated. But they'll have a number of choices in front of them. It might be a third party, possibly, that they would believe is the best way to do this. We are certainly hoping that there's earned revenue associated with this. Again, imagine people buying the ticket to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower or the Space Needle. We would be thrilled if there's earned revenue associated with this to operate, maintain, and improve both that park and other parks in our city. Can we hang the project above the river, or are we not free to get out of our limit lands? I'm not sure I understand the question precisely, but something hanging from some kind of structure would clearly be acceptable. I'm still here. I'm just looking at questions. Are there major concerns from residents in the area? And are there things people have voiced that they want there? That's a really good question. We haven't specifically polled the community about what they want on the site, even though we plan on doing that over the next couple of months. And I'd say as far as major concerns, I believe that what most citizens would say is that they're really unhappy with the current state of disrepair of the park. And that's why they're so excited about what we're trying to do, which is essentially to activate this entire site with lots of things that citizens love to do throughout the world. Look at any great park and you know that they're activated with lots of different things. I'm thinking of Golden Gate Park now for a moment, including museums, lakes, places to buy ice cream, museums, I think I mentioned museums, and many, many other things. If we get the maximum height required by government agencies, what can go on top of the structure? I would say anything can go on top of the structure. Clearly, the ability to go a couple of 100 feet and be the tallest thing in the general area offers great opportunities for viewing the surrounding area or for activities of all kinds. I think we all know that people love to go up high in the air everywhere around the world. What's the idea of having international participation in this project? We think that the great public places are really gifts to the whole world. And so we always thought that we didn't want to limit those who can submit to being local or even all from the United States. So we always believe that it gives us greater strength by having everyone in the world involved, and we intend to give this really as a gift to the people of the world at the end of the project. Can we submit hand-drawn and hand-rendered images? Absolutely, yes. Can a team, excuse me, can a team submit multiple ideas, each associated with separate emails? Definitely yes. what emphasis is there on making the project something ecologically green? The project must be net zero and green. Now, what does green mean in today's world? One could probably parse that finely and argue about it, but this clearly needs to be an environmentally respectful project. So everything in and around the park will be green. Still a little confusion about the 200-foot limit. So the limit on the west side of our site, which is where the SAP Arena is, was 130 feet approximately when the arena was built. So the arena was built to the maximum height. The city changed that limit on March 12th to add approximately 100 feet. As a practical decision, we're telling you to limit your design to 200 feet, but knowing that we'll be able to go up slightly higher than that at the end of the day. But the fact that the arena is approximately 100 feet lower than the west side of our site, we think offers a great opportunity to have vistas looking to the west, which is of course where Sunset is, just as an example. Should both sites, I think it means both sides, that is the east and the west side, be used for the design? You're welcome to use one side or both sides, whatever you choose to do. Why did you feel responsible to start this competition? Are you planning to open the site for tourists? The site is currently open to everyone, and it will always be open to everyone. There's one point about city parks, it's that there are no gates. They're always available. Even if there are gates, the gates would be open during business hours. Why did you feel responsible to start this competition? That's a really critical question. So John Ball and Tom Woolmott and I, when we started this, all felt the same lack in Silicon Valley and in San Jose of some magnificent physical object that makes your heart race and that we as humans enjoy. We've all been to many of these other places and thought we should have one too. So we were really surprised, I think anyone would be surprised, by the lack of interesting public structures or art on a world-class basis. We have some buildings that are very famous. The Apple spaceship and the NVIDIA building come to mind, but these are private spaces that you and I are not even allowed to go visit. Our project is exactly the opposite of those. This is a place where everyone would be encouraged to visit, and we think just like art is a critical part of life, so are public spaces. What do you propose is the best form of irrigation? We don't have any proposal as to the best form of irrigation, and I don't think in your designs you should spend lots of time trying to figure out how to do the irrigation. That would be a phase 2 decision. Are underground garage levels of limited size acceptable? I would say yes, but those would be details that would have to be fleshed out in phase 2, but we don't know the maximum depth that can be used because those studies have simply never been done, and so they would be done later. So I would say, again, be as creative as you like, and something like that would be technically evaluated in phase 2, not in phase 1. What are soil conditions at the site that might influence structural design? I can't remember if I answered this already, but those soil analyses have also not yet been done. They would be done in phase 2. Given the recent California drought, how much water is actually in the river? Excellent question. I was there yesterday afternoon, and I would say the water typically was 1 to 2 feet deep. In a storm, the water could be 20 feet deep. It's a raging river. The Army Corps of Engineers spent a couple of $100 million after the floods we had. I think they were in 1993. I can't remember the year, but they built 2 giant box culverts that are approximately 40 feet square that bypassed the site. And this was because we had floods in our downtown that went right up to office buildings to the east of Highway 87. So I mentioned this just to say that there won't be floods here in the future because the flood control plan has been implemented, but these giant box culverts are there, and they would limit the depth of the water in a severe storm. But in the winter, it would be typical that there's 2 to 10 feet of water flowing through the river. Will parking be on-site or off-site? We don't anticipate any parking on-site, but the question about an underground garage is one that we haven't talked about, but it would be in the realm of the possible. To have parking at grade would be was not going to happen because the 15 acres are too valuable to use any of it for parking, other than some kind of specialized handicap parking, maybe. But there's thousands and thousands of parking spaces within walking distance of the site. And that's because being across the street from SAP Center with a capacity of 17,000 or more means that anytime there are events there are literally thousands of people walking down the street going to the event. So there are probably within a couple of blocks, possibly 3,000 or 4,000 spaces. So for the vast majority of the uses of the site, I don't think there will be any parking issues. Also, being across the street from this multimodal transportation hub, there's going to be parking there too. So we will not need to add parking as part of what we're doing. I'm out of questions right now. Just to reiterate, any questions that were not answered will be answered. If you don't see answers on the website, please feel free to contact us anytime. We are incredibly excited about our project. We think it's one of the most interesting urban placemaking projects going on in the world right now. Again, we're reaching for the stars. Our only limitation is whatever creative ideas you all come up with. So we're really excited to meet the 3 finalists once they're chosen, and of course the winner next July. So thank you for your interest, and please keep in touch. We will keep communicating with you until we answer any and all of your questions. Thank you.